And then it goes on, another little wonderful rhetorical question, or shall I take his word for what I am, since he is my creator and the one who knows the true condition of his son? So it always is coming back, am I going to make true what is really false? Am I going to proclaim what is false? And am I going to not believe in his knowledge and believe in my knowledge? Or am I going to take what he says? Because he is my source, the source of my energy, the source of my very life, the source of my very being. Am I going to take his word because he knows my true condition? He knows the truth about who I am, the thing that we seem to have covered up by the clouds, the darkness that we seem to have covered up. The true essence that you were saying, Ron, is what we are. That's what it is. God has condemned me not, no more do I. Do I have to fall into that thought anymore, in that darkness? And then that beautiful little prayer here where it says, Father, I was mistaken in myself because I failed to recognize the source from which I came. I was thinking, that brought up a child's story the other day. Well, just because Jeffrey's starting his senior year of high school. And he's so big now. He's so tall. He's a real person. He's a man, it's like, wow, when did that happen? And I was talking to him today. He was standing in his bathroom, and I said, I remember, he stands so tall, and he bends over the sink. The reason I bring this up is because when we moved into that house, he had just turned 3, and he couldn't even reach the water faucets. I had to have a little stool that he stood on to reach the water faucets. And I said, do you remember that? I had that stool. Yeah, I remember, because Mother, you tell me this like every other week, 'cause I'm looking at this going, remember that you couldn't even see yourself over the top of the thing to look up and all this. And I thought to myself, this is, he remembers those truths, and that's his story, right? That's his personal story, his personal journey. And the house that we live in and have lived in for 15, 16 years, that's where he grew up. As we've all have, just the moment I said that, you all went back in time, right? To the place where you grew up, the little stories, the things that made you who you were. And what the Course is always saying is we want to know who we are. We need to know who our source is, and we need to know our journey. I was thinking about the book, it popped into my head, Who's Your Mother? Is it Who's Your Mother? How does that story? Are You My Mother? Do you remember that book? Are You My Mother? That children's book. And the little baby bird, I think he falls out of his nest, and then he's walking around to all the other little animals, and he's going, are you my mother? He even walks up to a crane. Isn't it a crane or something? And he says, are you a big steam shovel? See how well we all know this story? And he's trying to find out, are you my mother? We're trying to find out who's our source. And there's a lot of books like that. There's Paws and Claws. I don't know if you remember that one. There's lots of little books. And I was thinking back to all the books I used to read to Jeffrey, and they were all about trying to figure out who you were, right? Kids' books are all about telling you the basics. Then as we get older, we figure, we know. Then you get A Course in Miracles that says you have no idea. You don't know who you are. And it's time you find out who you really are. See, and that's what this is saying here. I was mistaken in myself because I failed to realize what I am, the source from which I came. I have not left that source and entered into what seems to be form, a body, what seems to be a world out here, and to end my existence by the thought of death, when God promises us a life eternal. The Course tells us constantly life did not begin with birth, nor does it end with death. I was mentioning this last week. There's a very powerful workbook lesson, lesson 167, that talks so much about death. It's a great, one of these days, it's a long lesson. There is one life, and that I share with God. It's about almost 3 pages, 2.5 pages long. Read that sometime, because it's so powerful about the Course's idea of life. It says there is no death, they're just different forms of life. What does that mean to us? We don't understand exactly what that means. We get the idea something's not ending. It is emulated in nature, too, when we look at a snake, when it sheds its skin and it moves on to another form of skin. We see that from a caterpillar going into the chrysalis and becoming a butterfly. We were at Epcot Center. Well, when we did our conference in Florida in April, and they had one of those butterfly exhibits there. And so we went into the little room there, and they're just always so beautiful, aren't they? Beautiful. They tell you, look for this butterfly, it means this, and look, this is what the different colored butterflies mean and what that signifies in nature. And you're just looking around in the flowers to see these butterflies, and sometimes they land on somebody and they get all excited, and children stand still so the butterflies will land on them, and it's just fun. I mean, your inner child definitely comes out when you go into the butterfly exhibit. And then they have a little, a bird, it almost looks like a birdhouse, but it's the house where they've, all the caterpillars make their chrysalises, and then they come out of the chrysalis, and the chrysalis just hangs there, and they become the butterfly. They emerge out into that. And I was looking at that little house there, and I thought, nobody really wants to stand here and look at this. This is not a fun house to look at. It's pretty ugly looking in there. Just looks, if you've ever seen a bunch of chrysalises, they're not pretty. They just look ugly, and they're broken apart because the butterflies come out of them. And very few people stand there and look at the chrysalises. They're all looking at the butterflies. You just kind of pass by it. But we sit here and we look at death. We're scared of it. We're worried about it. We don't know what it is. We think that we're going to go through it. You know what that is? It's just like in that butterfly exhibit. You pass on to something else, a new form of life. Now, do we know what that is? I don't know what that is. I haven't gone through that process, at least that I can remember at this point in time. I may have had a few lessons in this, as the Course says, that we may have, if birth doesn't begin with, if life doesn't begin with birth and doesn't end with death, there may have been many, many times that we've gone through this. We don't know. But what we know is nothing can end life, just like science says. Life is energy, and you cannot kill energy. It just takes on different forms. So we don't know exactly, but that's what we gather in here. So this idea, you know, where it says in that second paragraph, in that second line, I have not left my source in God, the source which knows the truth about me, to enter into a body and to die. My holiness, the truth about myself, which that first line in that first paragraph said, my Father knows my holiness, so my holiness remains a part of me. No matter what I've thought about myself, what I've done, what I think other people have done, my holiness remains a part of me as what? I am part of you, Father, as I am part of God. I cannot change my holiness, nor can I change my source. So when I'm looking, are you my mother? You know, are you my source? God's saying yes, constantly. That infinite source of answers, of power, of peace, of support in your life. That's what he's there for us. And my mistakes, it says about myself, are what? Dreams. Mistaken thoughts. I let them go today. And I stand ready to receive your word alone for what I really am. Like Bobby was saying, you know, I said some things I wished I hadn't said to my son. Well, haven't we all? Doesn't everyone have compassion when you say, I made a mistake? We all rally to that. You know, it's only when we try to hide these things and cover them up and keep them in the darkness that we build up more and more problems. But when we finally come out and say, look, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, everybody wants to extend that compassion. Everybody wants to give you a break. Why do you think that is? Because we all want that break. We all want to know that truth for ourselves. And so if we can offer that to somebody else, it makes us feel so much better.